Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana, a channel all about tabletop gaming. And today we're going to continue our series on the Pathfinder core classes with the Fighter. So I'm very excited about the Fighter. The Fighter is a class that I always felt, maybe didn't get enough love in previous editions of the game. D&D 3.0, 3.5, and 5th edition, and Pathfinder 1e. And I think what Paizo has done with 2nd edition Fighter is fantastic. It's a class that I am most looking forward to having in one of my games. I do have a Fighter in my party where I'm actually a player, which doesn't get to happen for me very often. And he is stellar. He'll just tee off. He's incredible when everything starts going well for him. And just very exciting just to watch. So I can't wait to have one in my game, or maybe even one day play one. Which, is a very big change compared to the attitude that a lot of people had to fighters previously. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and jump into what you're getting when you pick a fighter. So the fighter's key ability, you get to choose between strength or dexterity, and you get 10 HP per level, so that puts you on par with the champion, just below the barbarian. It's it's the standard for your martial characters. And you will get expert perception, which will go up to master at level 7, and this is the beginning of, you'll hear me say this a lot, where you've got you're not just getting a proficiency boost, but you're also getting a little interesting rider to go with it. So you get Battlefield Surveyor when you get that master proficiency in perception, which will also give you a +2 circumstance bonus to your initiative rolls. Now, what's interesting there to note is that this will not stack with the general feat or some of the ancestry feats that you can get, which will also give you a circumstantial bonus to initiative. Which, you might see as a downside, but just look at it as it's saving you a feat that you were most likely going to take that you can now spend elsewhere. So that's awesome. One of the big things, and I'm not sure how much we've really talked about it yet, is that Pathfinder, which in 1st edition had all sorts of bonuses, just a lot. Now there's really only 3. There's an item bonus. There's a status bonus, which is usually going to come from magic. And then there's going to be the circumstance bonus. And the circumstance bonus is just that. It's circumstantial, it's situational. It's more about displaying your character's skill, or an indication of the way that the balance of power has shifted due to positioning or things like that. So it's much more simplified, and no bonuses will stack with each other. You'll always take the better of the two. So that's just something to keep in mind as we talk about some things, both in these videos, the class videos, and other videos that I just don't think we've mentioned yet. So as far as saves go, you will begin expert at fortitude, which will progress to master at level 9. You'll begin expert in reflex saves, which will proceed to master at level 15. And you'll begin trained in will, and that will move up to expert at level 3. And here comes our next rider. With the fighter, you get bravery at level 3. And what that does is it increases your, basically for fear effects, you're going to, a success is going to count as a critical success, which is something that classes don't typically get until they reach the master stage. Those, shifting your level of success abilities are pretty standard at master. But in addition to that, which only applies to will saves against fear effects, so it's not as universal as the higher level ones. But in addition to that, you also reduce your fear stage by 1. So what that means is, you're not only reducing the duration, you're also reducing that penalty while you have it. That's very strong, especially for a frontline class. So having any field where you're getting a boost to one of your weaker saves, especially against a common effect like fear. it's something that you'll see abused a lot by characters. When I say abused, I don't mean it's bad, but you'll see something that's taken advantage of a lot by characters, players, that demoralize action. So this is mitigating one of the most common, non-attack actions that might happen to you in combat. So it's very strong, very cool, very thematic for a fighter who's used to facing, overwhelming odds and charging into a whole line of enemy opposition, You'll begin trained in your class DC, which will proceed to expert at 11 and master at 19. That's something that is used a lot for some of the unique battlefield options that you'll get, some of your unique fighting style things that you can do. So that's going to be used. And so it may not ever come into play for your characters. Depends on what sort of feats you go with. For skills, you're going to get to choose between acrobatics or athletics. And then you're also going to get 3 plus your intelligence modifier additional skills that you're trained in at first level. I would say that for the most part, I'd probably recommend the athletics, but if you're a dex-based character, planning to do a lot of, jumping from rooftops sort of things, I guess that's not a great example, but like balancing sort of things, you might prefer acrobatics, but athletics, especially on a fighter, is very strong. For your attacks, and here is where it's all about for the fighter. You are expert in simple, martial, and unarmed attacks. And you are trained in all advanced weapons. So what that means is, if it's a weapon that you don't normally have access to, you're considered trained in it, even if it's a very rare sort of weapon. So examples of advanced are going to be like the best example is going to be the Aldori dueling sword. It's an advanced weapon. It's not common. It's not something that anybody can get. They're typically more powerful. So the fact that you're not having to burn a feat just to be able to use it is very good. Yes, your proficiency is going to be lower than with the more traditional style weapons, but just having that barrier of entry removed from a lot of dedications and things is huge. And expert at level 1 in attacks is, that's the top. No one is that good at the beginning. So you're going to have, on average, +2 attack over the next martial, that ranger or that barbarian that might be in the party. And that's huge, and that's going to stay with you for most of your career, where you're always going to be ahead of them. Even up to the top level, which, spoiler, you're the only legendary attack with weapons in the game right now. So you start expert, you'll progress to master at level 13 and legend at level 19. And we'll get into some of your class features that are actually going to skew that. We're going to see that you actually are making master and legendary attacks a bit sooner than that would indicate. So in addition to that, you are trained with all armor and unarmored defenses. That becomes expert at level 11, where you also get armor specialization, which allows certain additional benefits with some armor, like, for example, a bulwark of heavy armor, which allows you to add your armor item bonus to your reflex saves. The idea being like, an explosion just happened, but I'm wearing armor, and that's going to aid me in my defense there. So even though I'm not slow, I can sort of tank. Or even though I'm not fast enough to dodge, I'm still tanking that hit, which is a very cool thing. It's going to have certain armors are going to give you damage resistance to certain types of damage. So that's a big benefit, and you're getting it at level 11. I believe the champion also gets that benefit, though I don't know that I mentioned it in that video. The fighter will also proceed to master armor proficiency at level 17. And that's very good. That's just, a step behind the legendary of the champion and the monk, which, is coming. So it's about as defensive as the game gets. It's definitely as offensive as the game gets in terms of martial characters. So now let's talk about the more class-specific stuff outside of just these proficiencies. Oh, I should mention as well, going back to your attacks, You get weapon specialization at level 7, and you get greater weapon specialization at level 15. So that's just a scaling bonus to your damage rolls with those weapons, based on what your proficiency rating is with them. So, like for example, greater weapon specialization, if you're a legend, which only the fighter gets to, you're adding 8 damage to every weapon that you're considered legendary with, which, again, you know, oh, it's level 19, but we'll get to how that comes on earlier. So all fighters get attack of opportunity. This puts them in a great position. They get it at level 1. Very few classes are getting great reactions at that lower level. They're also getting shield block, which is another great reaction, you know, and the ability to raise a shield. So those are 2 great ways that already you're going to feel like you're in control of the battlefield from level 1. A lot of classes do get shield block, but attack of opportunity is very limited. I believe only the barbarian and champion get exactly attack of opportunity. Some other classes do get some reactions starting around level 4, level 6, level 8 even. But as far as that classic attack of opportunity, the fighter gets it automatically. Unlike those other classes, you're not having to spend a feat to get a really solid reaction, and you get 2 out of the gate. So, you know, for a character that is the quintessential frontliner and the expert at battlefield tacticianing and things, you're going to feel that way from the start. So everything else really is gravy. You're going to get the bravery, as we mentioned before, at level 3. At level 5, you're going to gain weapon mastery. So, what weapon mastery does is it lets you choose a weapon group, for example, swords or axes or spears or even shields, I believe, and you will gain master proficiency with those weapons. So you don't get normal master on your attacks until level 13, but you get to pick one group that you're really good at. Could be bows, could be whatever. And so 8 levels earlier, you are master at that weapon group. And you're going to be master with any simple or martial weapons that fall into that group. With the case of swords, there's not really any simple swords. But with some of the other ones like axes and things, there might be simple weapon versions of them. Spears are a great example of one that has in all levels. You're also going to progress to expert with those advanced weapons. So now your niche sort of unique weapon is now on par with most of your weapons within that weapon group. So if there's a unique sword that you really like the Eldor dueling sword, you know, now you're just as good with it as you are with most of your other weapons. Admittedly, you'd be better with another type of sword, but theoretically you like what you're getting. You know, the Eldor dueling sword, for example, is a nice D8 finesse weapon, so that's a very strong option. It's the biggest hit die you can get and still use your dexterity. So those are the sort of things you're looking for there. You're also going to get critical specialization with weapons in that group. So you're getting that at level 5. I believe most classes don't start getting that until later, with some exceptions. So that's really good. That's really strong, especially with the fact that the fighter is usually 10% more likely to hit, and therefore the way Pathfinder 2nd Edition's degrees of success, the plus 10, minus 10, works. That means you're also 10% more likely to crit. So getting those critical specializations is a huge boost. Some of them are very debilitating to enemies, but none of them are bad. The clumsy that you get with some, where the guy's just the enemy's just taking a penalty to reflex saves and AC, which is going to help everybody in the party, is just rock solid. At level 9, you're going to get the next big thing that's great about 2nd edition fighters. You're going to get weapon flexibility. Now, in past, and this is something that I really, wondered how they were going to handle, because again, I didn't do much in the Pathfinder 2nd edition playtest, but I really wondered how they were going to handle, because in older editions, the fighters always got extra feats. I think even in 5th edition, they're still getting bonus feats and things. But in Pathfinder, everybody gets 1,000,000 feats. So you've got to do better than just a couple extra feats. So what they've done is, with this combat flexibility, you get to pick a level 8 feat, which you get this ability at level 9, so that's solid. Level 8 feat or below, and you get to have that at your disposal for the day. And then the next day you can either renew that if it's, important to the type of fighting that you're trying to do, or you can swap it out to something that might be better for tomorrow's jobs. So, the example that I use when I was explaining this to my players is, let's say you are typically a very mobile skirmisher type combatant. You're relying on moving and hitting, but then you find out you're going to be, classic, you're going to be on some sort of early, like, train or, maybe even a ship. And so your ability to move about might be hindered. It might not be as viable. And, you know that if you're going to be engaging enemies, they're typically not going to be where you are. They're going to be at a distance. So now your martial capabilities are, not as viable as they used to be. So you can take this feat and pick up a ranged option so that, you're saying, okay, let me spend the morning, get out the bow, haven't used it in years, make sure that I've got what it takes, remember some of my old tricks. Okay, here we go. I've got this bow down. Now you've got, an extra edge with those bow attacks that you didn't have before because you had been focusing on a whole different fighting style. Or, let's say that you're going into a situation where you want to be able to defend a location, and you're typically, a more, we'll say, risky type of a character, all about, big hits with a two-handed weapon, but you realize it's less important for you to defeat the enemy than stop them from getting past you or defeating you. So now you go ahead and pick up, a shield feat to make yourself more effective there. This is really cool, really strong, really versatile. It plays into that idea of the fighter, not as just being, powerful, but also, because the barbarian is strong. The ranger is, practiced and experienced in what they do. But the fighter adds this element of, and all these mechanics add this element of expertise, of saying, like, I can fight anywhere, anytime, any way that I need to. It's really so much more than just being good at fighting. It's about, being able to illustrate a character who takes this sort of thing seriously, studies it. While they may not be as smart, in other areas, when it comes to fighting and battling, they are the experts. And that's a really unique, cool thing about 2nd edition fighters. At level 13, the fighter is going to get Weapon Legend. So just like before, you're going to get to pick a weapon group, and that weapon group is going to progress to being a legend proficiency. So now you are as good as possible at level 13 with your attack rolls. That's the same level that you got the master proficiency for all your other weapons. So basically everything is moving up a stage. So you're going to be legendary. So, we use swords as the example. You're going to be legendary with swords that are martial or simple. You're going to be master with swords that are advanced, and you're going to be master with all weapons that aren't swords, that are martial or simple, and you're going to be expert with all advanced weapons that aren't swords. So that's 4 levels of proficiency. It can seem like a lot to keep track of. The reality is you're most likely only caring about the fact that you're master in all simple and martial weapons and the advanced weapons that you've chosen, or legendary in the martial and simple weapons that you've chosen. That's really all you're going to care about. But it's nice to have these fallback, with the advanced weapons and things, for if you're in a situation again where, you need to change up your fighting style for the next day, and, by taking a feat, and there's a particular weapon, like, you want to be tripping, and so you want to, get a really, like a Kopesh or something, like a sword that you can still use with your shield that has the trip trait that is not, a standard weapon. So that's really cool. That's really fun that you have those options. And don't quote me that a Khopesh is an advanced weapon. I was just using it as an example of something that's not quite normal. I haven't really dived into, what is considered advanced or not. But just having those options open to you is a big deal for this class. Finally, you're going to get improved flexibility at level 15. And that's going to give you a second feat that you can change out every day. This one up to level 14. What's interesting is you can use the level 8 feat to gain a prerequisite that would enable you to take that level 14 feat. So, you can really change it up and add a whole new facet to your capabilities with that. Because a lot of these feats are going to require that you have another feat to get the most out of them, to get that top tier version of the feat. And that's just, again, it just plays into that, I can be an expert at this tomorrow, which is very much how wizards and prepared casters work. And that's really what you feel like. You feel like, yes, the barbarian can swing for the fences and hit really hard, but what if it can't? The sorcerer has this limited spell list that it's very good with. You're probably, as a sorcerer, picking as many spells as you can that are as useful in as many situations as possible, versus the wizard who might say, okay, yes, I can't solve this problem today, but if we can rest, tomorrow I'll have exactly what we need to bypass this and make it a trivial situation. And the fighter is, not quite to that degree, but very similar in that it can say, okay, all right, we've seen what these gnolls, with their skirmishing style, or, it's probably not a great example considering you were talking level 14, you're probably not still fighting gnolls. But, you can say, okay, we've seen the enemy and how they fight. Tomorrow I'll be ready for them. And that's super fun, super cool. So you're also at level 19, you're getting, your master proficiency for your class DC. You're also getting, your legendary weapons. And then what's interesting is level 15 is a big level fighter. You're getting your ability boosts. You're getting your master in reflex saves. You're getting your greater weapon specialization. It's a huge level. You're also getting that improved flexibility. But I mean, that's pretty much it. That's the core of the class here with fighter. And as we said, like a lot of these things just like proficiency bonuses, and they mostly are, but a lot of them are also giving you these little riders that are either giving you an extra edge in a situation or saving you a feat that you might otherwise need to take. So on the subject of feats, let's talk about how you're making this fighter your own. And at this point in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, no class has as many options as the fighter. I haven't counted it out, but it's a lot. 10 to 12 at any given level of feats. So potential. I think we're over 100 for sure, and it's a lot to digest. And it's a lot to think about, and that might make it a little daunting. But again, the way Pathfinder 2nd Edition works is, at any given level, you're not choosing from every feat. You're choosing from a particular selection. And an app like Path Builder is really going to help you simplify that and make that a lot less scary. But it's definitely not necessary once you've learned when and where you're getting access to what types of feats. So what do they do? Well, what don't they do? Within the context of being a martial character, fighters have feats for absolutely everything. So, whether you want to specialize in a particular fighting style, like ranged attacks, big two-handed weapons, shields, two-weapon fighting, being a duelist where you've got one hand free and, like a lighter weapon in one hand, or combat maneuvers where you're shoving, tripping, things like that. There are numerous feats for each of those fighting styles where you can really hone in on what you want to be doing round to round in combat. There's also a lot of feats to improve your mobility and action economy, which allows you to do the things you want to do more often, which is, the benefit. It's going to allow you to have fewer situations where you cannot do what you want to do. Which is huge. You're going to be able to gain unique reactions. You're going to be able to deflect projectiles, melee weapons, even spells, potentially even reflecting them back with a shield or a well-timed sword strike. at the the caster, which is just super fun, wild, and it's really one of those things that's where Pathfinder has said, it shouldn't only be the magical characters that can do these amazing things. You look at how the skill feats work, and then how a lot of these martial feats work, and they're really changing that dynamic of how much more fantasy the magical characters are versus the non-magical. And the great thing is, because these are all optional, you don't have to take any of those. If you want to play a more grounded game or just a more grounded character, you don't have to use those feats that are letting you jump off of nothing to make another leap, reflecting magic back with a sword strike like you're in a Legend of Zelda game. Like, you don't have to do that, but you can, and that's very good, because again, like that, the old disparity just does not work, and it's not enjoyable for a lot of people. You're going to get the ability as well to shrug off conditions, or at least mitigate them, or temporarily, put them off your character. You're going to get the ability to assess an enemy and get, and take advantage of that assessment. You're going to get to increase at the higher levels. At 20th level, you're going to get to increase the number of reactions you have in a given round, even being able to react to each individual enemy, to being permanently hasted, to, some other feats some other capstone abilities that are more specific to individual fighting styles. But the coolest part about all these feats is, that Pathfinder has introduced, these trait concepts, which, we're in 4th edition and some other editions of the game, but they're really, I think, working very well here. So some of your feats, some of your abilities, your actions that you're picking up with feats are going to have different tags on them. They're going to be considered different types of actions. So there are stances that you can go into which provide you certain bonuses at a certain cost. For example, it can be as simple as, entering into like a parry stance, where your defense raises even without a shield. There's also going to be openers, which are things that you do to initiate combat. Sudden charge is a great example. It's a barbarian feat as well. But this idea that, you can only use it as your first action, charge in, and do the damage. And then there are presses, which can't be your first action. And they're usually going to be things that are, they're reducing the penalty for a follow-up because of the multi-attack penalty, or providing some other unique benefit that requires some form of setup to have already been done. Then you're going to have finishers, which, are, once you use a finisher, you can't attack anymore. You can still move or step or, raise a shield type of things, but the idea is that you've put everything into this attack. There are also things called flourishes, which are usually, when you're combining multiple actions into some really fancy skill stuff. And that's something that you can do only once per round. You can only flourish once, even if you have multiple types of flourishes, because they're typically pretty powerful effects, and you don't want somebody to be able to do them multiple times. And so you can string these together, with the unique reactions that you're getting, and you can create a really signature fighting style for your character. No two fighters will ever need to play alike. There are so many options. There are so many ways that you can set up your fighter to, be landing hits, tripping people, throwing people, pushing them around, shoving them, repositioning, as well as anything else, disarming, all while, wielding whatever type of weapon that appeals to you, and just really almost building like a custom, series of moves that you want to use, little combos. And you've got enough feats to not just have one of these combos. You can have, a couple of basically situations where you're really imposing your will on the enemy and showing them this is, the way that we're going to fight, whether you like it or not. And, having all these advantages and just decimating opponents, not just physically, but with tactics and planning. And that's very satisfying compared to, some of the other ways to play. So being a fighter no longer feels like this generic, frontline character, but you've become a versatile, powerful expert with a focus, who can focus on myriad different occasions and fighting styles and situations. In previous editions, your fighter, was typically getting sort of pigeonholed, whether by taking a subclass or by, just having to invest heavily in all these feats just to get an idea off the ground. Now, because of your increased bonus, because of the fact that, no other classes are as accurate as you are, that's making you more successful by default. It's also meaning that you're not having that, and the weapon specialization being built in, and the way that the fundamental runes work, increasing your weapon, means that you're not having to invest feats just to keep up in damage with other classes. So it means that you're leaving yourself plenty more room to master not just one style, but multiple styles. The versatile feats that you can swap out mean that in addition to having these various styles, as well as these, having room still for these support feats that aren't really part of your style, but are for either making it so that you can use your style in more situations, or just so that if you can't use your style, you've got some option beyond just the standard, I swing. But those versatile feats also mean that, even if you aren't going to be able to use your best thing, if you have some idea of what you're up against, whether it's a recurring type of enemy, in a long-term campaign, or if you just happen to know, like your dungeon master tells you, okay, we're going to be running this adventure path, or this kind of story, and undead are definitely going to be there, and you have a vague idea of how undead might fight, then you can plan out these sort of things, and that's just so good. You're really no longer having to invest everything in doing one thing with the fighter. And not only is that making you more versatile and more powerful and having more fun and options tactically in the game, but it's also creating a role play of a character who feels like a combat expert instead of just being good at combat. And that's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference, where other characters, not just your fellow players, but NPCs in the world, might take you more seriously than just, yeah, he's good with a sword, what's he doing in this meeting? Well, you can say, well, I know that this army is going to employ these tactics because we fought them before, I've seen it, this is the way to counter them, we need to shore up our troops by teaching this. And that's fun, that's interesting, that's the kind of stuff that, should be part of, I think, that fantasy of playing a fighter. And before it wasn't really there. You could, of course, role play it, but you didn't have the mechanics there to say, okay, yeah, I don't archery, but give me tomorrow, let me play around, and then I can start training our troops up to be better archers because I'll be a better archer tomorrow. And that's, it's that mastery that the class is bringing that it hasn't before, and that versatility. And so I think the fighter is super fun. I think it's never been as interesting in any edition as it is in second edition. We've talked in some of the other videos, pros and cons of some of the reinterpretations that Pathfinder 2nd Edition has done, especially with the classes like the Champion that has completely shifted its focus from being a heavy striker to a very defensive reactionary class. The Fighter, I think, is a perfect example of when they've taken a concept and dialed it up to 11 and made it the best it can possibly be. I don't think that anything compares in terms of transformation to the success of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Fighter. You should really try it out, even if you've never had an interest in playing fighters before. Look into those abilities, look into, the types of characters that you can make and the types of, flavor and role play that you can get out of these new abilities and specializations that the fighter has. That's it. That's the fighter. As you can tell, I'm very positive on it. Definitely down in the comments, let us know, what kind of interesting off the wall builds you've made for your fighter, what you may like or not like about, some of the big changes in this edition of the game. How does it compare? What were you able to do before that, you haven't been able to do yet? Things like that. If this video has been enjoyable to you, if you've gotten something out of it, if you're thinking now maybe I should try the fighter, definitely give us a like, a subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Helps us know what we're doing right, or sometimes what we're doing wrong, and really keeps us able to, motivated to keep making these videos for you. So thanks so much for stopping by, listening, and welcome to the collective. We'll see you next time.